Welcome back to this week's edition of the State of Recruiting, your weekly Horns 24/7 recruiting podcast. I'm Mike Roach, and I'm joined as always by Nick Harris. And we got a show for you today. A little bittersweet of a show, but we'll talk about that at the end. Before we get into everything, Nick, how's it going?
Going pretty good. Ready to get into it. I saw you fired off a lot of crystal balls yesterday. I'm excited to talk about those.
Yeah, I looked at my 23 crystal ball record and I had like four picks in, and I think like three of them were already committed. So, I needed to get some more picks in. Um, I've been probably when I first started on this job, I was probably too loose with the way I crystal balled, and then in the last year or so, I think I probably got too tight with the way I crystal balled. So I'm trying to find a happy medium there, and to be able to use the crystal ball to indicate the future, but not really tie myself to it in a way that, like, I guess I don't want it to be where you put a crystal ball in March and something happened in November, so it's
Yeah.
just how that deal goes. So
We also
um,
have PTSD from the 2022 class.
yeah, for sure. So we're going to talk about that a little bit about the crystal ball article I put down. I think I put five new picks in. I talked about a few other guys that I thought I was getting warm on, and things like that. We'll talk a little bit about the Texas philosophy this year because I think, um, not really by design, but I just think that something's a little bit changed in the Texas recruiting philosophy, and that we'll see kind of how it bears out within this class, and then we'll talk about this weekend's Under Armour camp in Dallas. So let's jump right in on the crystal ball side. Five new picks for me. Andre Kojo, the Mansfield Timberview offensive lineman with a confidence level of 6. Jamal Shaw, the West Orange Stark athlete with confidence level of 7. Jaden Chapman, the Harker Heights offensive lineman with a confidence of 5. Samu Tamanu Pepe, I think I did that right, from Atascocita, the big 380-pound defensive tackle with confidence of 5, and Avian Carter from Amarillo Tascosa with confidence of 6. Let's start with Kojo. This is going to be kind of a theme of this article is that Texas is in a good spot with a lot of offensive linemen because they were really aggressive in offering a lot of these guys first. Andre Kojo was one of those guys. Talking to him a couple weeks ago at the NLA camp, I think that he wants to, enjoy his experience a little bit and take trips and do all the fun stuff recruits get to do. But if you listen to him, I think it's pretty clear Texas holds the lead there. When I asked him kind of what schools, he mentioned Houston and TCU as like the other schools with Texas at the moment. But I asked him if those three schools were like locks to get official visits, and he said only Texas was a lock at this point to get an official visit. Um, I think as long and this is the story with early crystal balls, right? This is kind of what I worry about is um, numbers change. If they get other guys in front of him, then his situation may change and they may not have room for him. And so if you put one in early, you've got to always be factoring the math and how that comes in. But I think as long as Texas continues to have a spot for Andre Kojo, um, I feel that that's the
Yeah, I agree. Texas was the first to offer. Kyle Flood identified him. I believe that was last winter. Went ahead and threw out that offer, and he's been able to build a really strong relationship with Kojo and his mom since. Now, Kojo is a year young if you're talking about like where he is in his grade. So whatever college program he goes to, he's going to need a little bit of developing, and he's aware of that. And that's something he likes to talk about with college coaches. So he's planning on going into a college year one, redshirting, getting that development, and he sees a really good development plan under Kyle Flood. I also like where Texas is at with Kojo.
Jamal Shaw from West Orange Stark. Nick and I both talked to him pretty quickly after he got his offer, and I don't think he could really hide his excitement. I think Texas is looking at him as a corner or a defensive back of some sort, but he could also play on the offensive side of the ball. His brother Johnny Shaw was a former Texas commit who ended up at Louisiana Tech. I think he was, yeah, I believe he was committed in Mac's last class, going into Charlie's first class. So I think Charlie cut all those guys loose. Charlie Strong did when he took the job, but yeah, his brother was committed. I mean, he's from West Orange Stark. Texas has a deep connection there with guys like Earl Thomas, having played there, Deion Beasley. So I think again, I know people hate when kids say it's a dream school and all that, but I think in this case, that Texas offer weighs pretty heavy for Shaw.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to meet Jamal at the Shock Doctor tournament in Houston a couple weekends ago. We talked about that not too long ago here on the pod. And he said when he got the phone call from Bo Davis with the offer, he said he almost cried on the phone. So definitely doesn't hide his excitement about Texas. He's going to let his process play out a little bit, but I think Texas is the runaway favorite at this point as well. It just kind of comes down to how hard Texas pushes. But at this point, I don't see why they shouldn't push that hard.
Harker Heights offensive lineman Jaden Chapman, again, a Kyle Flood first to offer, just like Kojo. Um, and there's a lot of cautious optimism with that pick. I think that I think Texas is in a good spot. He's the Central Texas prospect. They were the first to offer. He's been to campus several times. I think his family wants him to stay close, and so I think that all those things bode well for Texas, but I think that Alabama kinda looms in this recruitment, and if Alabama really puts the hammer down and pushes, we saw last year kind of with Jamarian Miller that, like, sometimes all those other factors don't matter, when Nick Saban decides to really, put it in. So, I think, right now I've got a confidence level of 5. I think Texas is probably the favorite, but I can't go a lot higher because of that Alabama factor.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. The Alabama offer definitely makes things interesting, but Texas being the first to offer during the season last year and then talking to him in the week after, he really likes what Texas has to offer. He likes what Kyle Flood has to offer. And of all 5 picks that you made yesterday, I think this is the one that should excite fans the most, just because of the upside that Jaden Chapman has, the development that he still has to go. Yet he's already really strong on the outside as a tackle. I think he has a little bit of versatility too. I think he could slip inside if he wanted to. He's a fun prospect at the next level. I think he's going to be a game changer.
My next one was Tao Manu Pepe. I've said that name 100 times in the last couple of days without having to stutter over the last name, and here I am twice on the podcast stuttering over the last name. Samu Taumanu Pepe, the defensive lineman from Humble Atascocita, played his junior year at well over 400 pounds. He's a big man. What I was told is he's down to around 380 at this point. Um, Taumanu Pepe visited Texas, I think 2 weeks ago, and Texas kind of has the jump on the competition there. If you look at the offers, aside from Oregon, Texas is probably like the highest level one he has. So those two programs are probably gonna get a good look from him. Bo Davis is invested in this one, and it feels like Bo has a guy each and every year he kind of picks out. Last year it was Chris Ross. That's like his guy. I think that Tom Pepe is kind of emerging. Is that they want big bodies, especially going to the SEC, and that's him. So Samu is a guy that can kind of clog the middle and play that nose. I think it's early, and I think that there are a lot of moving pieces, especially on the defensive line. So this one could be one that changes down the line, but right now I like where Texas stands.
Yeah, I agree. I remember when Samu first burst onto the scene as a freshman. We were all hearing about this 380, 400-pound defensive lineman at Atascocita that's really athletic, and he backs it up in the weight room as well. And then finally being able to see him in person was surely a treat last year as well. So, Texas throwing out that offer and prioritizing him at this point in his recruitment, definitely a good sign if they want to bring him in. Like you said, big bodies in the SEC will do great wonders for that transition. So we'll see if Bo Davis can secure one.
And then Avion Carter, the defensive lineman from Amarillo, Tuscosa. I just feel like Texas kind of took a lead in that recruitment back in the fall. You talk about another big body, another guy that has an SEC type frame that they can add up front. I talked to some people near him. It sounds like he's trying to get there in March, but if he doesn't make it in March, he's definitely planning for the spring game at this point. Visited Texas a number of times. I just think that they kind of made a move last fall and can really build on that this spring.
Absolutely. And talking to a couple of sources out in West Texas, Texas is definitely in a really good spot with Avion Carter. They have been since about the mid fall, like you said. I think the harder Texas pushes, the more lead the more lead they begin to grow. He's a huge body. You want to talk about big bodies? He's a guy that's kind of filled out really well. 6'6". I forget what his weight is right now, but just a really huge prospect. He stands over everybody. Maybe needs to translate that size into a little bit more physicality, but it's definitely possible given his intangibles. I think he's going to be a fun project at the next level. And as I see it right now, Texas is doing a really good job in trying to get him to Austin.
All right, on the current picks I had in Ashton Porter, Javian Taviano, and Ruben Owens. I had all three committed, or I'm sorry, picked to Texas. Porter feels like probably the best bet to end up in this class out of that group. I mean, he's just I don't know. I've almost been waiting on the Ashton Porter commitment. Just every week at this point. It feels like I think Texas is in that good of shape. Taviano, we've talked about early on in his recruitment. Really loved what Texas was doing last fall. We dropped our confidence scores because it sounded like Oklahoma was really surging. I think that trip to Junior Day really helped for Javian Taviano. Texas is very much back in that race. So I'm not going to raise the confidence score or anything, but I do I do think it's trending back up. And then Ruben Owens, we've talked about week after week. I think that, in the end, Texas will be a major factor. So leaving all three of those crystal balls on Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. The what was the first one? Ashton Porter. Yeah, I talked to Ashton a couple of weeks ago at that same, or it wasn't at the NLA camp. It was at the underclassmen report camp where he came away with the defensive line MVP and an invite to the Under Armour game. But talk to him. He's going to just slow his process down. Take a couple of visits, take a few visits. Arkansas is another school that's up there. He wants to see. But Texas, I think, will be in the thick of it towards the end. He's really just trying to make sure he does his due diligence and seeing some other programs. But I also really like where Texas is at. But maybe wait a couple of months on that one if you're a fan waiting to see when the next commitment would happen. Taviano, you mentioned, last spring we felt really good. We threw in those crystal balls. We thought maybe that recruitment could close down pretty quickly. It slowed down, and other schools made a push. And now that as we sit here in March of 2022, Texas is in that race. I really like where Oregon is at, Texas A&M, and Alabama. That's just going to be a crowded race all the way around. But as you said, I think Texas worked their way back into the picture after the Junior Day visit. Definitely a strong visit experience for him. And then the last one, Ruben Owens, like you said, we've talked about on the pod many times. Texas is going to be in the thick of it regardless, but it's going to be a heavyweight battle. Texas A&M, USC, Georgia, Alabama, those are going to be the schools that are going to be heavily involved. So definitely not a pushover recruitment for sure.
Here's a couple of guys I'm getting warmer on, getting closer to crystal balls on. I'll just hit them quick. Lafayette Koat, the tight end from Arlington, Sam Houston. I think Texas has been able to establish a lot of position there. I am wary of North Carolina, though. He's got family in that area. I believe he's got a parent in that area. And, Mac Brown's a good recruiter. We all know that. So watch North Carolina in that one. Connor Stroh from Frisco Wakeland. I think, again, Texas was first to offer. They've done a lot to get out in front on this offensive line recruiting stuff. But, there's a couple of other schools that I think intriguing. Arkansas is one of them. Stanford just offered yesterday. I could see them becoming a player. So I think in many ways, Connor Stroh reminds me of Cole Hudson, who was also from Frisco, that I think he's going to end up at Texas, but right now he's going to play his process out. Kyle Parker from Lovejoy, talked about that a lot too. I just think, in the end, Brennan Marion gets his guy, but schools like Louisville and Arkansas are two programs to kind of keep an eye on. Jordan Matthews is probably, I said, probably the safest bet for Texas to land an out-of-state prospect in this class. Getting a lot warmer on him. There is some competition coming from LSU and Texas A&M, so I'm going to hold off. Jonah Wilson, the wide receiver from Duquesne, who Texas offered during the winter. I think that they're putting themselves in a really good position for. He's coming in March, kind of be his first visit, during this part of the cycle to Austin. I think coming out of that trip, I could see myself putting a pick in, just didn't do it yet. Braylon Shelby, the edge prospect from Friendswood, who Texas offered at the junior day. Um, I think I think this is another case where I could put a crystal ball in the near future. I'd like to see Braylon get back to campus. I'd like to do a little more digging and talk to a couple more people, but I think Texas is in a good spot there. And then Freddie Dubose, a 2024 prospect from Schertz Clemens at wide receiver. Talking to him at junior day, he was kind of, really excited when he got the offer. I think he lives down the street in Schertz. He said many times about staying close to home so his mom could watch him. I think Texas made a really good early impact there.
Yeah, those are a lot of really good identifiers as far as guys that are starting to get really warm on Texas. I'll touch on a couple, and you could just kind of look at the whole picture. There's a lot of schools that Arkansas is also involved with, which is particularly interesting. I don't feel like Texas has had a ton of recruiting battles with Arkansas and recent classes, especially this many in one class. So that's definitely a testament to Sam Pittman and their recruitment job he's been able to do at Arkansas in his first couple of years. But
and I'll say this. When they have been in like high profile battles, they've usually come out on the losing end.
Unless it was Keytron Jackson.
That's what I mean. Texas has come out on.
I see what you're saying. I thought you were talking about Arkansas.
So if you take about Keytron Jackson and Jalen Catalon and guys like that, like Arkansas's got them a couple times. So
we'll absolutely. See. You mentioned Braylon Shelby and Connor Stroh. I'll touch on those as well. Connor Stroh, once again, that was another one that Kyle Flood identified and threw out an offer to first. I believe he was also offered during a game visit. Talking to him and his family, they really like Texas. They really like where they're at with Texas, but they also really like where they're at with Arkansas. You mentioned Stanford. That was also one that I saw yesterday on the Twitter timeline that I was like, okay, I could see Stanford getting involved for him. David Shaw just does a really good job with connecting with high academic kids, and Connor Stroh certainly is that. And Braylon Shelby, a really athletic edge out of Friendswood. I love what he brings to the table. I think he's a nasty, filthy player off the edge. I think he's probably better than his 3-star composite ranking at this point. A really strong player. Texas being able to throw that offer out to him on junior day, that was huge. If they can capitalize on that and move that forward with some momentum and get him in the class, that would be awesome. And you mentioned Freddie Dubose, the 2024 wide receiver. Oddly enough, there's more commits in the 2024 class than there is in the 2023 class as it sits right now. So if Dubose could be the third one here in the next few months, that sure would be an oddity. But I think he's really strong. Someone said to me a couple of weeks ago, and I'd have to fact check this if this is completely correct. But it was something that Schertz Clemens only had 13 or 14 touchdowns last year, and Dubose accounted for 8 or 9 of them. So the production is certainly there. And he's a big, tall, lengthy receiver. I'd like to see him work on drops a little bit, but he has a ton of time to work on that. I think he's going to be a monster at the next level.
Guys I'm cooling off on a little bit that maybe I had high previously. Paul Freeman, the wide receiver from Fort Worth All Saints Episcopal. Derrick Williams, the safety from Westgate in New Iberia, Louisiana. Mikel Harrison Pilot and Temple at Temple. TJ Shanahan and Colton Vosik, the prospects from Austin Westlake. With Paul Freeman, it's really just, I think the wide receiver picture is extremely crowded right now. There was a time where I thought he'd easily kind of be part of this class, but there's a lot of moving parts to the wide receiver position. I don't know, kind of if Texas is going to, I think they're going to be picky with where they go at receiver. And so I just kind of would say my stock is a little down on him. Derrick Williams, I think, he's visited Texas a couple times. They'd obviously love to have a safety of his level. I think that they're in it. I think that they'll probably get a visit. But I just think that they've got some work to do to overcome like LSU and Alabama after talking to some sources in Louisiana about him. Mikel Harrison Pilot, that's a weird one. I don't think either side has ever shown enough to each other, to feel good about it. I think Mikel has been like pretty dialed in on some other schools kind of nationally, and not afraid to get out of the state. So I don't quite see it unless Texas turns up the intensity there. TJ Shanahan at Westlake, I think, is a guy Kyle Flood would love to have, but I think A&M made a really good impression beating Alabama while he was on a visit last year. Um, I think they've got some time, but I just my stock is kind of cooling on him. And then Colton Vosik, I would still say sitting here today, I think Colton Vosik ends up at Texas, but this is not going to be the cinch recruitment people thought it was for a Texas legacy like Vosik. I think he is really enjoying the attention he's getting from national programs. I think he's getting around, and even when we talked to him at Junior Day, um, it was kind of like, yeah, I'm glad to get this offer, but I'm going to really take my time with this process, and I'm truly wide open, and I think that's the case. So, not that I don't think Texas will get him, I do think it'll be a fight, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Touching on a couple of those, I can start with Mikhail Harrison Pilot. Being a local prospect not too far north in Temple, it just hasn't really seemed like he's had a ton of interest in Texas from the very beginning. Notre Dame and Michigan, those are some schools that caught his early attention. But in-state schools like Baylor and TCU, I feel like have done a little bit of better job, working their way up to the top contenders list for him. That being said, he's still coming in for multiple visits. He came in back in January. I could see him return, and here in the month of March, him and Braylon James have been kind of taking some visits together. So that's kind of a pair to watch. And Braylon James mentioned to me a couple weeks ago, he's kind of waiting to see how the Texas class shakes out and, who jumps in. So maybe that could be a case with Mikhail Harrison Pilot as well. You mentioned Derrick Williams, safety out of Louisiana. Texas was able to get him on campus a couple of times last year, wasn't able to bring him back in January for Junior Day. So, getting him back on campus is going to be crucial here in the last year of his recruitment. Trying to think of the last one you mentioned, Colton Vosik. Obviously, a really athletic edge. A lot of Texas fans really wanted Texas to offer right after the state championship. They did on Junior Day. But letting his process play out is probably the smart thing. See what he has to offer around the country, and I could see Texas at least securing an official visit out of the situation. And as you said, I could see Texas still potentially grabbing him in the class, but he's definitely going to slow down his process and evaluate his options.
There's a difference with a guy like Vosik versus like Connor Robertson, right? Like last year, I talked to Connor Robertson when he got offered, and he wanted to tell me he was wide open, but you could tell like, okay, this is going to be pretty easy for Texas.
Yeah,
I don't get that feeling at all from Vosik. So I do think he's really open in that. All right, so that's the Crystal Ball article. We had it up on the website, so you can read more in depth there. I think what's interesting to me this year is you mentioned it earlier, Texas has more commits in the 2024 class than they do in the 2023 class. I think that right now, while they're not turning away commitments, they're not necessarily pushing for early commitments, because I think we saw last year guys like Evan Stewart, Armani Winfield committing early, and then the staff having to really hold on to them all year long. And I think that these early commitments often turn into decommitments anymore. That's just kind of the way it goes. So I think more what their strategy is get them in now, build on that to get them back in the late spring or summer for an official, and then really try to close mid to late summer going into the fall and really build the core of their class there. So I don't want people to get kind of antsy with where this class stands. I think this is kind of the strategy moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the numbers from last year, they took, I believe it was 26 or 27 in the class. And moving forward to here in the 2023 class, they're not going to have the luxury of taking that many guys this year. So that also gives you the luxury of not having to push for early commitments. If we look to see where this 2022 class was this time last year, forgive me if I'm wrong here, but I believe we had Armani Winfield in the class, Malik Murphy, Travell Johnson. I believe Jadon Blue and BJ Allen were potentially in the class by now as well. If not, it was in the coming weeks. And they were already working towards getting a few guys before the June dead period opened. So, it was kind of a dire.
This was right around the time Evan Stewart decommitted.
That's true. Yeah, I forgot about Evan.
And Evan, Yeah, Evan committed before BJ. So yeah, BJ would have been in the class. And this Evan decommitted Under Armour weekend last year. So
Yeah, that's
um
right. Okay. And it was more of a dire situation to bring in guys, I think, last year to get some momentum going, especially with the talent they were able to bring in early on. I think it's just different in the 2023 class for a couple of reasons. A, there's not as much top end talent in the state of Texas in the 2023 class. I mean, sure, if Ruben Owens or John Tay Cook, called Steve Sarkisian today and wanted to commit, I'm sure they would let them in the class. But kind of looking around the entire picture, I don't think they're really pushing hard for anybody else at this point. There are still other guys on the table. I feel like if Avion Carter hit up, the staff today trying to commit, I'm sure he'd be able to jump in. But it's not as much of a situation as it was last year where, they were really trying to get some early commits on board. They're letting things kind of breathe and play out. And, I think in the summer, I think that's when you could really see a lot of momentum, happen for Texas, kind of similar to what happened in the summer of 2019 with all those commits that happened within like a week period. Who knows? We could probably see that again.
and because of that big number they took last year, they do have to be more choosy this year. So I think
Yeah.
that kind of plays into the strategy as well. We'll see a lot of these guys this weekend at the Under Armour camp in Dallas. I think it feels like it's been just slow, kind of stop start stuff in recruiting recently, and this feels like kind of the go part of our spring with Under Armour and then 2 7-on-7 tournaments in a row in Dallas coming up, and then we kind of jump into April where spring football starts. So I'm excited. I'm kind of ready to go. Like I've been sitting around twiddling my thumbs the last couple of weeks. So um, all right, Nick, this is Nick's last show with us,
Yeah.
and he's got an announcement to make, and I'm going to let him make the announcement, and then I'll say what I got to say afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I have this will be my last week with 24/7 Sports. This is my last podcast here on the state of recruiting. Man, it's I've been kind of thinking of what to say for the last couple of weeks since I knew it was going to happen, and I really don't have a ton to say, but definitely wanted to thank everybody for listening, especially on this podcast. I feel like we were able to grow it and really make it a thing. Coming in, I had very little podcast experience. And I remember the first podcast that I tried to do, I think I tried to record it on my phone and it only came in through like one headphone and it was a really janky experience. And now look at where we are, streaming here on StreamYard and it's super seamless and it couldn't have made that possible without Taylor Estes. So thank you for Taylor for all of that. But also just thank you to the entire Horns 247 staff, especially Mike for, taking the chance on me, taking the opportunity to, give me, a lot of learning lessons along the way. And, I feel like I'm really ready to, excel in this industry. And I don't think it'd be possible without the great people that I've worked with in the past couple of years. So thank you, Mike, and thank you to everybody there. But I'll be having an announcement on Monday on, where I'll be headed. But for now, I just wanted to spend these couple of days, thanking everybody and really appreciating the experience I've had at 24/7. I'm really excited to see what the future holds.
When I hired Nick, and Nick, you can tell the people if I'm lying. I told you
Yeah.
you're not going to be around here very long, and that's just kind of the essence of this role. If you do well, we're a big enough platform that you can get promoted. And would I love to have Nick around forever? Yes, I would love to have Nick around forever. He's invaluable to what I do. I mean, he's improved my day to day so much, just helping with things here and there and taking things off my plate. But it's kind of like coaching. It's a coaching tree. Like you want your assistants to get promoted. So super happy for Nick. He's moving on to something that I think will fit him really well. I think that he's done a great job since he's been here. He's worked his butt off. He's learned the business as well as he could from my end. And I only know how to teach it one way, and I kind of taught him my way. So I think he'll continue to do well. And I think we're going to have a really quality replacement.
I agree. I wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about the replacement.
So that announcement will come, I think, this week actually. So we'll get to that, and that person will be on the podcast next week probably. But we wanted to say farewell to you, Nick, and we maybe our paths will cross one day again.
If the stars align, hopefully so, God willing.
All right. Well, we want to thank all of you for listening. We want to thank all of you for playing along and interacting with the show, giving us ideas. Thank you to Taylor Estes for producing this. Thank you to Nick for all your hard work over the years. For Nick Harris, I'm Mike Roach. We'll see you guys next week.